So what is the reference model in Scrum at Scale? The reference model is a very important concept, and it helps us to start off transformations the right way. So instead of starting a transformation in a big bang manner, starting with, let's say, 200 teams, and yes, this is something that organizations actually do. They'll start from no Scrum to 200 teams within a couple of weeks, right? In Scrum at Scale, we have this idea of the reference model. And that means instead of starting with 200 teams, we start with 2 or maybe 3 at the beginning. Why do we do this? Well, this actually has a couple of benefits that are very important. And the first one is we want to start the Scrum out right. If we start with 200 teams, then we're going to have a lot of problems getting those teams to a good quality of Scrum at the team level. So finding 200 Scrum Masters, getting enough training for everyone, getting everyone onboarded is going to be a huge task. And so instead of dispersing our forces across these 200 teams, instead we focus our best people on those 2 to 3 teams of the reference model, because those teams are supposed to be the reference for those that follow, right? And this is where the name comes from. So if you have a senior coach, have that person be the Scrum Master of one of the starting teams, right? Because you don't want to have juniors play around with it. Maybe it's their first time being a Scrum Master. And if this is the start of our organization-wide transformation, we want to have our best people on it. So the first benefit of using a reference model is that there is supposed to be the reference. You can get the Scrum on the team level to a very high level and thus set the benchmark for the rest of the teams to follow. The second one is that transformations are inherently political. And so we want to show some quick wins, right? And if we just focus our energy on 2 to 3 teams, we can show a lot of progress, right? We have our best people on those 2 or 3 teams. And so we can reap some early wins, we can show them, get more buy-in, and then broaden the transformation. And the third one, and that is very important as well, is that you are going to run into impediments, right? This is normal in Scrum. Impediments are obstacles that need to be resolved and that we can see as a chance to get better. And there are some impediments that are rather small and inside of the team, right? So a printer isn't working, a staging environment is down or something like that. But there are also organizational structural impediments. And those larger, more difficult impediments usually cannot be solved inside of a team. So now, do we really want to start with 200 teams at the same time and let them all run into these structural impediments at the same time? Or would we prefer to have 2 or 3 teams run into these problems first, almost like a scouting force for our main force, right? Run into the problems first, take note of them, solve them with the help of management, and then have the other 198 teams not even notice that there were actually problems like that before, right? And so a typical example is the vacation policy inside of the organization, right? It's not as easily changeable as fixing a printer, but is something that wreaks havoc in a lot of organizations, because whenever there are deploy dates, actually people have to take their vacation days before they get canceled out, right? And so then people aren't there before big deployment days, right? And this is just one example. There are a ton of different examples, but the basic idea is you want to have this small scouting force that is highly trained to serve as a role model, to get you some early wins, and to also run into problems before the main force, so you have time to fix them before your whole organization goes into a standstill, because you started out with 200 teams and all of them went into the problems at the same time. So that's the reference model for you. If you're interested in learning more about business agility in general or Scrum at Scale, head to teamflow.de, where I'm offering regular seminars on the topics.